Hello guys, so today we're going to be doing a LS400 92 to 94. This is for an automatic, so they're keeping the automatic gearbox, and we've done some little tricks on this one, some customization for the customer, so stay tuned for that. But let's get into it. Right guys, as discussed, this is a 92 to 94 LS400. It is retaining the automatic gearbox. All the wiring is in there for that. We have added a bunch of customization for this customer, so we will go through that as part of the layout. But as you can see, completely brand new harness. So what we're going to do now, we're going to cut through the build photo so you can see exactly what the harness looks like underneath all of that heat shrink, and we'll show you all of the sub harnesses that are made up of this complete harness. So let's do that now. I'll be back in a second. Right guys, so now you've seen exactly what the build process is. Let's jump into what we're going to be doing today. Number one is the layout. So we're going to go through the entire harness, where everything plugs in. We're also going to go through all the customization that we've done for this particular customer with this particular harness. Then we're going to jump into the testing, which is made up of testing with just the ignition on and obviously testing with the engine running as per usual. Right, so in terms of the layout, let's start right here at the ECU end and we'll work our way from there. So ECU side, really nice and simple. You've got your 1, 2, 3, 4 ECU plugs there, all unique, can only be plugged into one place. Super simple, not much to go wrong there. Coming out of there, you're going to see we have this little loop plug over here, and that is going to be the injectors. Now this is one of the first customization items. Basically what it is the customer has expressed an interest in possibly going to LPG. Now normally on LPG systems, the LPG ECU wants to intercept the injectors to obviously cut them off and obviously activate the LPG injectors. Now normally what you would see on some kits is they go around, they cut all the wires for the injectors, they tap into them, they go around. What we've done in this case for the customer is we've actually put all 8 injectors singly into an 8-pin DTM plug. So again, injector 1 to injector 8. Now the astute amongst you would notice that this is a 92 to 94. That means this only has 4 injector outputs for the ECU. You'll see here that we have actually split or joined the 2 sets together, and so we've taken the 8 individual wires to this plug over here. Now this side is coming from the engine harness and this side is coming from the ECU. So if the customer wants to fit an LPG, he can just unplug this connector and then we can put the 2 connectors on there, take it to the LPG ECU, and there they will intercept the injectors and you haven't got to cut a single wire, which is exactly what we wanted to achieve. All right, if you also wanted to go to aftermarket ECU, again, that means we also have all 8 injector wires right over there. So we could technically just go straight from there, get a new plug and wire all 8 injectors directly into an aftermarket ECU. So that's another added bonus of that particular feature. Next up, you'll see we've got this oil/CLT connector. What that basically is the customers wanted the ability to insert an oil pressure and temperature and a coolant pressure and temperature sensor. Right, so that means that what we've had to do here is we've got an 8-pin plug over there, which gives us the ability to, on the engine harness, put the corresponding plugs on that side, and then he can add those sensors in, and the plug is coming right here by the ECU, so that'll be internal inside the vehicle for him to work with. Next up, coming from the harness over here, this big thick section over there, that goes right over to the fuse box. And another section that pops out over here, and that goes to the fuse box as well. So really nice and simple. All the fuse box plugs are unique, so you can't plug in anything into the wrong place. So that is obviously fantastic. Then we have the 2 client plugs, which are over there, which we'll go through right at the end. And that's what it relates to this paperwork that you see here. Right, so that's this section over here, really nice and simple, nothing too complicated. Moving along from here, we're then going to end up at our grommet. Now you can see the grommet is not sealed in yet, so obviously the customers can move this backwards and forwards to wherever suits their particular application. And then we have some SCL or epoxy lined heat shrink that they can heat up as soon as they are ready, and that will then seal this grommet onto the harness over there. Moving along there, we then have our first breakout section, and that's going to come off and go to our 2 igniters over here. Now obviously I've got them just bolted onto the back of the cylinder head here. That's where they're getting their ground from at the moment. The way we designed it is so that basically as it comes out the firewall, you can then just put these straight onto the firewall. They get a nice earth as part of the firewall being bolted to the firewall, and that makes it nice and easy and out of the way, so you don't have to worry about them being all dangling around in the engine bay over there. Moving along from there, we come straight up here, and then we end up at our molded T-piece over here. The harness is then going to split. Obviously, a section is going to go down the front there, and a section is going to carry on and go around the back there. I'm going to go to the front here because of the modifications we've done. It's quite a simple harness over here. So let's move along, and the harness basically just breaks out, goes all the way along to there. Nothing breaks out until we get right to the front over here. And then it's going to break out to a few sections. So number 1 is your coolant temp sensor. You can hopefully see the gray plug through there, just where my finger is over there. So that's your coolant temp for your ECU. We then also break out to the coil plug, which goes just in over there. So that's your coil on this top over here. And then underneath here, finally, we then have our cam sensor plug over there. So this is for the right bank cam, and that plugs in directly over there. Moving along down here, we then have another breakout down here, and that goes off to the mass airflow sensor. So that plugs directly in there. And then moving along down here, we have another breakout over here, one going off to our sub harness for the alternator. So again, we put these on sub harnesses so you guys can swap out alternators, and all we've basically got to do is make you a new sub harness to plug whatever alternator you decide in. So in this case, we've got the oval plug over here, but if you wanted to fit a newer 3UZ one, we could put the 4-pin plug on there, and vice versa. If you wanted to go backwards with the big round plug on the very old ones, again, we can just send you out a new harness like this, and you could plug straight in and off you go. Last section that comes down here is going to come straight down here and go to our Lambda sensor. So again, we're only using the primary Lambdas in this harness. We're not using the secondary Lambdas that go after the catalytic converters. So again, really, really nice, simple, and straightforward. Right, so coming back to the T-piece over here, we've got quite a few sections going out here, so it's going to get a bit busy in a minute, but we'll start with the nice easy stuff. So again, we've got our earth harness, so that just goes straight over there, goes to a little ring terminal, bolts directly on there. Now if you look at your cylinder head, you've got a hole down here to bolt into. Don't use that one because the hole is too big for the ring terminal. You've got another hole over here which is a bit too far down, which is where my igniters are bolted to, so you must use the top hole over there. It's an M8 bolt that you just put straight in there, and that just bolts the ring straight to the cylinder head, which is where the harness used to earth originally on this particular setup. Moving along here, we then have what I call our sub harness, only because it goes underneath the intake manifold. And what I'll do is I'll cut to some photos now, and you'll see it goes inside there, it goes to the starter solenoid, and then goes a little further, breaks out, and goes to knock sensor 1 and 2. Okay, so back over here now, again, you'll see it's an 8-pin plug. You can see clearly there's only 3 wires in there. So obviously what we've done is we have put twin core shielded cable to this particular plug, and that means that you will have the ability to swap over to Bosch wideband knock sensors if you decided to go the route of an aftermarket ECU. So we're building that functionality in already, so you don't need to go around changing anything. We would then just create you a new sub harness and send that out to you, and we do supply the Bosch knock sensors, studs and nuts, a whole kit that you can fit those onto the UZ engines over there. So that's that particular harness, and that's a usual one on there. Go over to the other usual ones. We have our injector harness. So again, you can see all of our injectors over there. What actually happens is the injector and the idle speed control valve. So you'll see the idle speed control valve plugged in over there. They are going from here, and I'm going to cut some photos now, but you can see they go underneath the intake, pop out to go to the left injectors, pop out to go to the right injectors, and the harness carries on to the front where the second mounting point is. You see the mounting point there, mounting point, and then pops out and goes to the idle speed control valve. All right, so coming back now, let's move on to one of the additions of many that we've added on here. So this particular 8-pin plug over here, this is called the TPS CLT sub harness, and basically what it was is the customer wanted the ability to move their throttle body, and therefore their TPS sensor would be moving. And also, as part of the plug that we went through over here, they wanted to be able to add a coolant temperature and pressure sensor. So as you can see underneath, I'll cut to a photo now, but if you look at the front there, you'll see there's a 4-pin DTM plug that's designed to add a sub harness for a coolant temperature and pressure sensor, and you'll see the TPS goes down along, pops out with the right bank injectors, and then coming back to here, it goes to the TPS plug that is over there. Okay. Rest of it is basically the main harness trunk section that's going to go along there. So obviously you can mount it or P-clamp it over there. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to pop over to the other side. It's going to be much easier to carry on from there. So coming up to here, we have another breakout over here, and that is going to then pop out and go to our gearbox section over here. So in terms of the gearbox, we've got our input speed sensor that's on this side of the gearbox. We've got our selector that's on that side of the gearbox. It then comes down a bit further and goes to our 8-pin solenoid plug, this side of the gearbox. We then have the output speed sensor, again, this side of the gearbox at the back. And then lastly, on the 89 to 94, you have a 3-wire Hall effect speed sensor. So we do put that connector on there for you guys, and we do actually bring that speed signal over as part of the climb plugs, which we'll go through in a minute. Moving along from here, we then are going to come along here. Nothing breaks out, nothing breaks out. Obviously the injectors are part of that sub harness. Goes along there, breaks out at the front here and goes to our cam sensor for the left bank over there. So that plugs in directly over there. Bring it down here. You should have a mounting point on there as part of your cam sort of mounting sort of bracket there that you can then secure the harness to. It's going to pop down to here just behind this coil over here, and it's going to split out into various sections. One of them being the actual coil plug itself. So that plugs directly in over there. The other one is going to be our oil plug. So again, as per the other plug at the beginning of the harness, he wanted the ability to add oil pressure and temperature sensors in. So we have actually put a 6-pin DTM plug so he can do that. Now, because it's a 92 to 94, we are using the oil pressure switch to control the fuel pump. So, Rob, whichever route you go down, and if you do want us to make you the harness for the oil pressure and temp sensors, just be aware that when you are doing this, you need to retain the oil pressure switch, because that is what causes the fuel pump to work correctly. Not a major issue with these, because to be honest with you can buy T-pieces. You can also buy sandwich plates and so on that can hold various sensors, one of them being the oil pressure switch over there. Next up, breaking off is going down to there, and that is going to be your Lambda plug over there. So again, we move it to come out over here and around there rather than through the exhaust over there. That just protects the connector from the heat of the exhaust, and it protects the wire from the heat of the exhaust. So it is now well away from the exhaust. You don't have to worry about that at all. Last section that breaks through is obviously going down through that hole over there, and it goes to your crank sensor over there. So again, everything is labeled for you guys, so you don't have to worry too much about it. I just like to go through how everything is routed so you guys can see exactly how everything works. Right, so that is now the whole harness layout. Hopefully it's been relatively straightforward and simple. Obviously I've gone through the pictures of what it looks like underneath the intake over there, so you can see how that is all routed as well. The pictures obviously included in as part of the build section, these ones over here, but I did go through them again as we went through it over there. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to quickly come back, and then we're going to go through all of the plugs that are related to what the customer needs to connect on their side. So bear with me a second and I will be back. Right guys, so now we're popping back again, and we're going to go through the 2 connectors that need to be connected. Now, because it's an auto, we do have a 12-pin and a 9-pin. The 9-pin being the pretty standard one across the board, the 12-pin being mostly related to the gearbox that you will see in a minute. So 9-pin plug, as I said, it is pretty much on all our harnesses now. So if you've seen on other videos, this is going to be a completely repetitive, but for the customer's sake, I'm going to go through everything and give you all the tips and tricks on how to connect it. Now, it does come with a complete wiring diagram in here, so you don't have to worry about remembering all of this, but I find it useful just to give you some extra tips that I can't obviously fit on here. Otherwise, I'd create a 20-page document that you guys would clearly not read because it's so long. So what we'll do now is, starting on the 9-pin plug, we've got pin number 1. That is going to be your red thick wire. That is your permanent 12-volt supply. Now, the reason it's a permanent 12-volt supply, A, that's the way Toyota did it. B, because the ECU retains memory, so it retains the diagnostic codes, a bunch of stuff. And basically, if you don't connect that to a permanent 12-volt supply, the second you turn the key off, the ECU is going to reset, all the codes are going to be wiped off, and doing diagnostics is going to be a real pain in the backside to carry out. So please connect it to a permanent 12-volt supply. If for whatever reason you absolutely can't, well then so be it. But like I said, doing diagnostics is going to be incredibly difficult. So if you have to put it on a separate switch, put it on like a master kill switch rather than your ignition switch. So at least you can keep the power on if you want to try and diagnose an issue. Moving on to number 2, that's going to be black with a yellow tracer. Now that is our starter signal. Really nice and simple. It is just a 12 volts. It does work through the neutral park switch. It is all wired correctly as per Toyota. So the vehicle will not start unless it's in park or neutral, which we will obviously test as part of the testing as well. But yeah, so you need a 12-volt signal because that's what the ECU is looking for as well. So no problems there at all. If you're using a key barrel, nice and easy to find. If you're using a button, just remember ignition 12 volts on the other side of the button, and the other side of the button goes to our black with a yellow wire in your 9-pin plug over there. Number 3 is the yellow with the green, and usually that's connected to the coolant temperature for your gauge. In this case, because of the customization, we no longer have that particular connection. So again, although it is in this plug, just because it's a standardized plug we pre-make, but obviously in this case, it's not going to be used, and I have grayed it out there, although I have actually said what it's for. So if the customer ever decides that he wants to sell the fuse box onto somebody else, for whatever reason, I don't know why, but anyway, all of that wiring is inside there as standard. So if he had another customer with a 92 to 9400 and he needed the fuse box, he can use that, and then his yellow and green would work. Next on number 4 is our gray wire, and that is for the fuel pump. Now this is controlled via the fuse box in this particular case. We're using the oil pressure as a type of safety cutoff. So as long as there's oil pressure, the fuel pump will keep running. If the fuel pump turns off or the oil light comes on, then the fuel pump will turn off. Now it won't prime, obviously. That's how Toyota do it anyway, so we've stuck to their way of doing things. It will come on when you're cranking to get the car started up, and obviously will keep running as long as there's oil pressure. Okay, when you do the fuel systems on most of these UZs, usually you have some kind of non-return valve so that the fuel pressure stays overnight. So when you come back the next morning, you should have fuel pressure in the system ready to crank over. So if not, you can install one of those, and then it'll make early starts in the morning much easier to carry out. Okay, so that's number 4. Number 5 is yellow with a red, and that in this case is connected to our cluster over here. We're going to be using that to check our check engine light and make sure that is working. Now, as you've seen, or if you would watch any of our other videos, all of our fuse boxes come with a check engine light on there, so you don't need to connect that wire up. If you're busy in the early stages, you can see the check engine light in the fuse box and tell whether the system is on and active. And obviously it's used to do the troubleshooting diagnostic codes, which we'll go through as part of the testing. Next up, number 6 is going to be a solid yellow wire, which again in this case is connected to our cluster. That is for your RPM signal. Now the RPM signal in these comes from the igniter. So if you've seen a couple of these before, you'll notice that one of the 5-pin plugs has 5 wires, one of the 5-pin plugs has 4 wires. The one with the 5-pin in, that's where your tacho signal is coming from. Now, the tacho signal that does come from their rev counter signal is a 4-cylinder signal. You can see why. What Toyota have clearly done is they've separated the engine into 2 sets of 4 cylinders. You've got 2 igniters, which talk to the 2 different coils. Coils talk to the 2 different distributors, and these distributors control 2 cylinders here, 2 cylinders there, and 2 cylinders there, 2 cylinders there. So the reason you get a 4-cylinder signal is because this is controlling 4 cylinders, and hence that is the reason why. And fun little fact, that fact that they give a 4-cylinder signal, that actually carries on right the way to the end of the 3UZs up till 2010. So from 1989 to 2010, UZ family, you always get a 4-cylinder tacho signal if you didn't know that. Number 7 is going to be black with a red trace, and that's going to be our ignition wire. So this is the wire they want to connect to an ignition switch. This is what's turning the whole system on, making everything active, powering up the ECU. Now then, if you are using a key barrel to do this, please bear in mind you get 2 types of 12-volt sources from a key barrel usually. You get accessory, you get ignition. The difference is accessory has its power cut when the key is moved to the start position. So if you are looking for your ignition power from your key barrel, make sure that when you find 12 volts, move the key to the start position and make sure that the power stays there. If it doesn't, you can clearly see what's going to happen. Every single time you move the key to the start position, you're going to cut the power to the fuse box, you're going to cut the power to the ECU, it's all going to shut down, it's not going to start, and lo and behold, when the key goes back to the on position, hey, your whole system, your check engine light's on, you think, and it's going to drive you crazy. So please just make sure that you do connect that. It happens more than you think. Right. Number 8 is going to be pink with the blue, and that is our charge light. Well, charge light, battery light, alternator light, whatever you want to call it, it is the light on your dash to indicate that your alternator is charging. Now, in this case, it gives off a ground signal. I've got it connected to our little device over there, which is converting MPX so that our IS200 cluster can pick up the battery light on there. Now, that wire is connected directly to the alternator on that 3-pin plug over there. Goes straight from there to there. It's got nothing to do with the ECU, so you don't have to worry about that at all. Little tips I've found over the years is that if you have a very old vehicle with a cluster with incandescent bulbs, what I've tended to find is sometimes, not all the time, sometimes it can backfeed a 12-volt supply from the cluster through that wire to the alternator, and then on the alternator you have both a permanent and an ignition 12-volt supply, and it backfeeds through there, and I've seen instances where it keeps the whole system alive after you turn the key off. So please be aware of that. How do you rectify it? If you can, get LED bulbs for your dash. That is by far the easiest way, because LED is a light emitting diode, which will then stop the backfeed in there. If you can't do that, fit a diode into the line so that you can't backfeed from the cluster to the system. And obviously, if you guys are building your own dash and you're getting lights for it, opt for LED lights. Solves all your problems in one go. You can get them for both the oil and the alternator. Which brings me neatly on to the last one, which is number 9, which is yellow with the black, and that is your oil pressure switch. So that's the oil light that comes on your dash, usually at 5,000 RPM. It is called the My Engine is Toast light. So basically, what will happen is, on this particular case, it is connected to our box over there, and it is going to show up on here when we turn the ignition on. And when we start it, it's going to turn off. Okay. As I said earlier, basically the oil pressure switch is also being used to control the fuel pump. So Rob, you must remember, and I'll say it again, when you go and look at expanding and adding in your oil pressure, temperature, and pressure, you will need to retain the oil pressure switch. Otherwise, your system is not going to work correctly. So if you need to speak to me, and I'll talk you through exactly how we do that. Obviously, we can make you a harness that'll then plug in there, which will also include whatever pressure and temp sensor, whether it's combined or whether it's separate. You can do both. And then we'll make that harness for you, and it'll keep everything intact. And obviously we can show you how to get T-pieces that you can then still have the oil pressure switch in, and a pressure gauge or temperature gauge as well. Sorry, sensor as well. Right, so that is the 9-pin plug. Again, pretty standard. If you guys seen all the other videos, you've seen it a million times. So let's move on to the 12-pin plug, and that is now for the gearbox. So as I go through it, you're going to see exactly why I say that. It's more or less everything for the gearbox on there. So number 1 is white with a blue, and that is your brake light switch. Now, it is fused inside the fuse box, so don't worry about where you get the supply from. But basically, we need to give it 12 volts whenever the brakes are pressed. Okay, obviously these are very old, but there's not a very, very old automatic gearbox. So the ECU does take that information into account, and obviously helps you to slow down if you are pressing the brakes. Right, number 2 is going to be a black with a red tracer, and that is going to be park. Now, these are basically just for if you are using indication lights. Okay, so you've got park, reverse, neutral, drive, 2 and L, like on a dash or something. But basically, yeah, that wire is going to give out 12 volts when the vehicle is in park. Number 3 is red with a blue tracer, and that is going to be your reverse lights. Again, it can be used for your dash to indicate that you're in reverse, but most importantly for you guys, it is what you're going to use to power your reverse lights if it is a street legal vehicle. Number 4 is red with a yellow tracer, and that is going to be neutral, again, just for indication lights on there. Number 5 is going to be blue with a red, and that's going to give 12 volts when the vehicle is in drive, again, purely for indication bulbs on the dash. Number 6 is pink and blue, and that's going to be 2, so it's going to give 12 volts when the vehicle is in 2. And then number 7 is orange, solid orange, and that's going to be low, or it's going to give 12 volts when the vehicle is in L. Okay. Now, not a lot of you guys obviously have those particular indicators on your dash, but you can fit them with LEDs if you wanted to. But a nice little feature as well is you can tell whether your switch is actually in the correct position. Remember, all of these selector switches that you see over there, they are adjustable. So what you can do is you can use those 12 volt wires. When you're in drive, does the drive have 12 volts? What you can also try and do as well is once you get there, you can actually boot it. Obviously, the engine will twist under the torque, and you'll see if that drive remains having 12 volts while you're moving along. If not, you can adjust the selector until such time as you do that. Okay. Number 8 is going to be yellow with a black tracer, and that is going to be your overdrive off. Now, what do I mean by that? Basically, on the early models, you have what they call an overdrive off switch. Now, remember, these are 4-speed automatic gearboxes. Third gear is 1-to-1. Fourth gear, I think, is 0.72 or 0.75. So that's what we call overdrive. So when I say overdrive off, if you want to look at it in a much simpler way, it's basically 3. So if you press that button, which you provide a ground via a switch, which you can then call overdrive off, basically what it means is the gearbox will go 1, 2, 3, but it won't go into fourth, because fourth would be overdrive, because 3 is 1-to-1. Okay. Next up is going to be a solid red wire, and that is your kick down switch. So as myself and Calvin have pointed out many times, those cables on the actual gearboxes are not kick down cables. They're line pressure solenoid cables. All the kick down is done electronically in the ECU. So you can fit a switch behind your pedal to create a kick down switch. And again, that requires a ground. So you can put the switch behind your accelerator, take the one side to just like any ground that you've got near the pedal. And obviously the other side will then go to our wire on the 12-pin plug over there. Number 10 is going to be a solid yellow wire, and that is going to be PWR or power mode. So if you've seen the shifters on these particular LS400 models before, you'll notice that they have a power mode. On the later ones, 95 to 97, I think they had snow mode as well. Don't quote me on that, but definitely the VVTIs had a snow mode. These just have a PWR mode. Now that yellow wire requires a 12 volt, so you can run a switch, call it PWR mode if you could retrofitting it, and then run ignition 12 volts on the other side, and then 12 volts over to our wire over there through the switch. And lastly, out of the 12, number 12 is not connected, but 11 is going to be a black with a yellow tracer, and that is going to be your speed signal. So again, that is the speed signal from the 3-wire Hall effect sensor that you've got there. Now that plug already has the 12 volts from the fuse box. It's already earthed in as part of the harness over there. So all you need to do is take that signal, and it'll give you a square wave signal that you would get off a Hall effect sensor. If you're interested, I think it's 4 teeth per revolution. That is how many teeth that particular sensor is reading. Okay, so those are all the plugs that are on the fuse box over there. Now in this particular case, as I said, Rob has opted for a bunch of customization. So you'll see on the second page here, if I can get it open, I've obviously told him exactly what's in this connector over here for oil and coolant temperature. So that's over there. Then I've also got the corresponding 4-pin coolant temp and 6-pin oil connector. And then on the injectors, I've basically just said that pin 1 is injector 1, pin 2 is injector 2, pin 3 is injector 3, and so on and so forth. So really nice and simple. Obviously, I'll be sending Rob this with another whole pack, which also includes the entire fuse box layout. It tells you what relay does what, and it tells you what fuse does what as well. Okay, right, so again, all the plugs down, hopefully nice and simple. Rob, obviously you will be getting all of this in an email, so don't stress too much about remembering it all, but that's it. So what I'm going to do now is pop back over. I'm going to get the testing sheet out. We're going to go through all the testing procedures. And as I said, one with ignition on and one with the engine running. So bear with me a second and I will be back. Right guys, so now we're back for the testing of the harness. And as I said earlier, in 2 sections, one with the ignition on and one with the engine running. So we haven't got too much to do, luckily. So what I'll do is I'll go through exactly what we're going to be testing both sections, and then we'll jump straight into testing with the ignition on and move over with the engine running. So nice and simple for the ignition on. We just want to make sure that we have our check engine light appearing on there and on the cluster over there. We want to make sure that our battery light or charge light appears over there. We want to make sure our oil pressure light appears over there. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to move over to that side over there. I'm going to move it from park into neutral, park into reverse. I'm going to try and crank it, and you're going to see nothing is going to happen. Right, so that shows that the starter will not work when it's not in park or neutral. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to move it back into park, come back over here. Then we're going to move into the test with the actual engine running. So what are we going to test there? Starter circuit. So then I'm going to try to start it and make sure it does start when it's in park. Then I'm going to move over and I'm going to pull each injector out one by one, so you can actually see that the engine is misfiring when I do so. So we know each injector is firing as it should do. Then we're going to pop back again. We're going to take a quick look at the tacho, make sure that I'm getting a rev counter signal. We'll also make sure that we get no check engine light, no battery light, and no oil light there. So they are turning off because they are all working. Then what we're going to do is we're going to go through the diagnostics. So I'm going to go through the whole procedure with you, how exactly it works and what exactly you do in regards to doing the diagnostics. So let's jump into the test with the ignition on, and super simple. I'm just going to give my black with a red tracer wire 12 volts. So bear with me while I do that. So I need two hands. And as I do, you'll see that the relays all start to click. All right, so moving along, you can see I've got my LED light in the fuse box over there. We've got our check engine light in the cluster there. We've got our battery light and we've got our oil light over there. All right, so as I said, I'm going to move around now and I am going to put the vehicle or the selector switch from park where it is now. You can hear the click and it's gone into reverse. Remember, it's park, reverse, neutral, drive, 2 and L. Those are your positions of movement there. So I'm going to take my yellow with the black wire here and I'm going to touch it on 12 volts. And you can see I'm getting absolutely nothing from the system at all. Okay, now then let's move it back into park. Click, all right, there you go. Okay, so now we're in park, we're going to be ready to do the test with the engine actually running. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get my ear defenders on. And as I said, all I'm going to do now is take the yellow with the black wire, touch it on to 12 volts. We should hear the engine crank over and start. So let's do that now. Let's fire it up straight away. Let's pop over and test all the injectors. Okay, I'm going to put the ignition back on again now. Rightio. Okay, so obviously everything seems to be running exactly as I expected it to. Park neutral switch is wired up correctly. The engine is firing, and obviously as I pull injectors out one by one, they are misfiring, which is exactly what we wanted to see there. Okay, so let's move on to diagnostics. What I'm going to do first of all is I've got a link that I'm going to put up in the top there, and that's going to show you exactly how to do diagnostics. It's a much more detailed video, so I'm going to run through the basics here and show you exactly how to do it. But I would advise you to go watch that video because it is very informative and does give you a lot more information. Okay, so on your fuse box, you'll see there's a little section there where my finger is. It looks like there should be a fuse there. There shouldn't be a fuse there. That is how you bridge the wire. So normally you'd have those big OBD2 or diagnostic connectors on the engine there, or in the engine bay of the vehicle. Now normally you'd bridge TE1 and ground, and then that would cause the check engine light to flash, and obviously that's how you would read your codes. We've now moved that all into your fuse box here in a nice, easy fashion that you don't need any special tools, paper clips, or anything like that at all. So we've got our 5 amp fuse over there. Our check engine light is on. I'm basically just going to pull that fuse out of there. Okay, and I'm going to bridge those two terminals there. And you can see our check engine light's actually just constantly flashing, which means there are no codes. Okay, so what I'm going to do, just to imitate a code now quickly, I'm going to remove the ignition. Let's do the MAF. Should pick up that code straight away. And what I'll do is let's put the ignition back on again. I may have to start the engine up, but easy enough done. Right, so we put the ignition back on again. Now we should get a code 24 and 31, because 24 is intake air temperature sensor, that's part of the MAF circuit, and 31, which is the actual airflow signal. So as I go in there now, you'll see the light goes off, and then it's going to go 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, so that's 24. And we're going to go 1, 2, and then 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, it'll only give code 31 after the engine's been running because it picks up there's no airflow. It doesn't do that at the moment. So, but what you saw there was it went 2, then 4, so 24, and then there was a long pause, and then it went 2 and 4, and it'll just keep recycling that over and over and over again. Okay, so again, that is how you read the codes. In your welcome pack with the harness, you do get a full list of all of those codes, so you know exactly what you are looking at in terms of doing diagnostics for that. And as I said, obviously, if you don't connect the thick red wire to 12 volts permanent, you're going to keep resetting the ECU. All of these codes are going to be wiped, and it's going to make diagnostics incredibly difficult. But again, I think I do explain that in the video that I'm going to link up there. But right, that is pretty much it for us. Obviously, we've done all the testing here. I'm super happy with that. We're going to get this boxed off, get it off to Rob so he can get it in his car and get it running. But thanks for watching, guys. If you do have any questions, please ask down below. As you can see here, we do custom work on harnesses. If it's an existing design, you just want to add some bits in, we can usually do it, but you do need to bear with me because I need to find time to actually draw up the design of that particular setup. But other than that, if you have any questions, ask down below. If you liked the video, like it. If you didn't like it. Subscribe if you can, obviously it helps. And most importantly, if you guys have any questions in relation to anything that we've covered today, please feel free to ask them below. It helps me to make videos to help you guys out. If you guys don't ask me any questions, then obviously I don't really know what videos to make unless I come across something in my day-to-day work. But yeah, so again, if you have anything you'd like me to do a video on, obviously please feel free to ask, and we will try and do that the next time we have that particular setup on the bench here. But thanks for watching, guys. We will see you again soon, and bye-bye.
Never break, always fight, never quit, do it right, play the game, win it life, have no shame, there's no time, feel the pain, live the grind, I could change, in my mind, pick a lane, commit and climb, the only way to win it life.